On the morning of Sunday, February 12th, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, wife of Thomas, gave birth to a boy, me. I was born on a bed of poles covered with corn husks. I was named Abraham after my grandfather. My birth took place in our rough-hewn cabin on Nolan Creek near Hodgenville, Kentucky. My father, Thomas Lincoln, was an uneducated carpenter and farmer. My mother, Nancy Lincoln, had little or no schooling and couldn't write. In 1811, my family moved to a farm on Knob Creek, which was also near Hodgenville. In 1812, my younger brother Thomas died as a baby. I named one of my own sons after my brother. I know that everyone says I taught myself to read, but teachers are important, and I did spend a short amount of time in a log schoolhouse. I began to learn my ABCs from a teacher named Zachariah Riney. I attended school with my sister, Sarah. Sarah had dark brown hair and gray eyes, and she was 2 years older than me. I loved my sister. I attended school dressed in a raccoon cap, buckskin clothes, and pants that were so short that several inches of my calves were exposed. We didn't have a lot of money for fancy clothes. At home, I heard the scriptures read from the family Bible. In 1816, I was saved from drowning by a playmate of mine. I knew I was saved for a purpose. Little did I know what that purpose would be. Later in the year, my family moved to southern Indiana and settled near present-day Gentryville. A cabin was constructed near Little Pigeon Creek. It measured 16 by 18 feet, and it had only one window. It was a very small house. Mother passed away on October 5th, 1818. She died of milk sickness. It's a disease you get by drinking milk from cows which have grazed on poisonous white snake root. I never forgot helping to carve pegs for Mother's coffin. Father hauled the coffin, which was made of green pine, on a sled to the top of a thickly wooded hill and buried her without a formal funeral service. Also in 1818, in Lexington, Kentucky, Mary Ann Todd, my future wife, was born on December 13th. Father married Sarah Bush Johnston on December 2nd, 1819. Sarah's first husband, Daniel Johnston, had died in the summer of 1816. This added 3 new children by her former marriage to the Lincoln household: Elizabeth, 12, John, 9, and Matilda, 8. I grew to be much closer to my stepmother than I was to my own father. During 1818 or 19, I was kicked and almost killed by a horse. Again, I knew I had a destiny. In 1821, I began borrowing books from neighbors. I read Pilgrim's Progress, Aesop's Fables, Arabian Nights, and Robinson Crusoe. Oh, how I loved those stories. And later I would read them to young Tad, my own son. In 1825, I borrowed a book titled Life of Washington by Parson Mason Weems. When the book got soaked with rain, I worked off its worth for my neighbor Josiah Crawford, from whom I had borrowed it. This was the very first book I ever personally owned. In 1827, I earned my very first dollar, ferrying passengers to a steamer on the Ohio River. In 1830, my family moved from Indiana to Illinois. I got to drive one of the ox wagons. I only stayed with my family for 1 year. In 1831, I decided to leave my family and go off on my own. My anti-slavery opinions may have been formulated when I saw the abuse of slaves during my second flatboat trip to New Orleans. I joined the Illinois militia for the Black Hawk War in 1832. I was elected captain of the volunteers, but saw no military action during approximately 3 months of service. On August 6th, I was defeated while running for the Illinois state legislature. I began to operate a general store, but that later failed too. I wondered at the time why I had been saved from death 2 times as a child, but as an adult everything seemed to go wrong. I became postmaster of New Salem on May 7th, 1833. I met a young woman named Mary Owens that year, too. She was 4 months older than I was, and she had come to visit her sister. I again ran for the Illinois State Legislature in 1834 and this time was elected. During the summer, John T. Stewart advised me to study law. On December 1st, I took my seat in Illinois state government. When the state legislature adjourned in February, I returned to New Salem and resumed my legal studies with great determination. Additionally, I continued surveying. In 1836, I was re-elected to the Illinois House of Representatives. On September 9th, I was licensed to practice law. Things were starting to look up. I was 28 years old when I was admitted to the Illinois bar on March 1st, and I moved to Springfield on April 15th. I now had income from a law practice as well as a state legislator. Thinking I was set, I asked Mary Owen for her hand in marriage, but in the fall, she rejected my marriage proposal. In 1838, I was elected for a third time to the Illinois House of Representatives. I met Mary Ann Todd, who had moved to Springfield from Lexington, Kentucky. Mary was living at the home of her older sister, Elizabeth Edwards. Despite great differences in our backgrounds, we became interested in each other. For the fourth and last time, I won election to the Illinois House of Representatives in 1840, and in the fall, I became engaged to Mary Todd. I married her on November 4th, 1842. James Harvey Matheny was my best man. I gave Mary a gold wedding ring with the words, "Love is eternal," engraved inside the band. Mary wore this ring until the day she died. The marriage took place in the parlor of the Edwards home, and the Reverend Charles Dresser, an Episcopal minister, performed the ceremony. We moved into the Globe Tavern, a two-story wooden structure in Springfield where we boarded for $4 a week. Our first son, Robert Todd, was born August 1st, 1843, at the Globe Tavern. He was so named in honor of Mary's father. Late in the year, we moved out of the Globe Tavern and began renting a 3-room frame cottage at 214 South 4th Street in Springfield. 1844 was a happy year, as Mary and I purchased a home from Dr. Dresser in Springfield for $1,500. I got myself a law partner that year. I didn't think things could ever be any better. We had our first photograph taken in 1846. Who would have ever imagined you could get your image on a piece of tin? Our second son, Edward Baker, was born on March 10th, and on August 3rd, I was elected to the United States House of Representatives. I took my seat the next year and spoke out against the Mexican War. I started speaking out publicly on slavery and started becoming unpopular with some of my former friends down south. I campaigned throughout New England for the Whig presidential candidate Zachary Taylor in 1848. His opposition to the Mexican War was not popular in Illinois. During the summer, my wife and I, with the 2 boys, traveled through the state of New York, visited Niagara Falls, and took a steamer from Buffalo across the Great Lakes. In 1850, my son, Eddie, died on February 1st. My third son, William Wallace, or Willie, was born on December 21st. My fourth and last son, Thomas, or Tad, was born on April 4th in 1853. His nickname stemmed from the fact that his father thought he looked like a tadpole. Don't tell anyone, but even though I loved all of my boys, I had a special relationship with Tad. I think it's because neither one of us was very comely. I was elected to the Illinois legislature in 1854, but declined the office on November 27th to become a candidate for the U.S. Senate. I was defeated in this attempt early in 1855. My opposition to the Kansas-Nebraska Act fueled my re-entry into politics. I jotted down what would later become a famous quote on slavery and democracy. "As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master. This expresses my idea of democracy. Whatever differs from this, to the extent of the difference, is no democracy." In 1856, I helped organize the new Republican Party in Illinois. Although I wasn't nominated, I received 110 votes for vice president at the Republican National Convention in Philadelphia. In 1857, I spoke out against the Dred Scott decision. Can you think of it? A person thought of as property and given no rights at all. I gained national fame because of a powerful speech given at Cooper Union in New York City on February 27th in 1860. I toured New England making more speeches. Regarding the presidency, I wrote a friend on April 29th that the taste is in my mouth a little. On April 18th, I was nominated for president at the Republican National Convention in Chicago. On October 15th, 11-year-old Grace Bedell of Westerfield, New York, wrote me a letter suggesting that I grow a beard. I decided to follow her advice. On November 6th, I was elected president over 3 opponents: Stephen Douglas, John Breckinridge, and John Bell, winning 39% of the popular vote, but nearly 60% of the electoral vote in 1861. I went to visit my beloved stepmother on the rainy day morning of February 11th. Jefferson Davis was inaugurated as the provisional president of the Confederate States of America on February 18th. I arrived back in Washington on February 23rd and was inaugurated as the 16th president of the United States on March 4th. The Civil War began shortly after that with the Confederate attack on Fort Sumter in April. It was one of the saddest days in my life.